But when people try to argue that she's not the face of our league, or if our league would be where we're at without her, you're literally dumb as fuck.
Finally, someone who gets it. Finally, someone in the WNBA who understands this thing called business.
Hey, Sophie. If they didn't like you then, they sure aren't going.
An emotionally raw podcast episode any active WNBA player has ever recorded. By the time the episode finished, social media was in full meltdown mode. League officials were reportedly scrambling behind closed doors, and Caitlin Clark fans everywhere had found their new
letting it all out and not holding back. She calls out the old guard. She calls out the people out there who refuse to say Caitlin Clark is
the newest and most passionate spokesperson. Welcome back to WNBA Updates. If you have not heard what Sophie Cunningham said, buckle up, because this one changes everything. To understand why Cunningham's words hit so hard, you have to understand the context she was speaking in.
That your job is easy, but when it is a simple call right in front of your face multiple times.
Into. The debate over whether Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA has been simmering for over a year now. Some people embrace it, others resist it. And a vocal group of critics have gone out of their way to downplay Clark's influence, argue that she is overhyped, or insist that other players deserve the spotlight more. Cunningham had clearly been watching all of it, and she had clearly been holding back until now.
Although most WNBA players have no idea how to become stars, there is one player in this dump with a functional brain.
Very first minutes of her podcast, it was obvious this was not going to be a polished, carefully worded media appearance. There were no talking points, no PR-approved sound bites. This was a woman who had seen too much, stayed quiet for too long, and finally decided she was done filtering herself for anyone's comfort. Let's start with the moment that broke the internet. When the conversation turned to Caitlin Clark's place in the league, Cunningham did not mince words. She made it abundantly clear that anyone who questions whether Clark is the face of the WNBA is, in her words, being completely foolish, and she said it with the kind of conviction that only comes from genuine frustration. "It really pisses me off when people say she's not the face of the league," Cunningham said bluntly. "Who would be? Sabrina. No, there are really good, well-known players in our league. I'm not discarding them at all."
The jealousy of Caitlin Clark was the topic of conversation. Sophie Cunningham was criticizing those who refused to acknowledge that Caitlin Clark is the face of the WNBA.
But when people try to argue that she's not the face of this league, or that our league would be where it is without her, you're literally dumb as hell. Those words, raw, unfiltered, and
It really pisses me off when people are like, she's not the face of the league.
Who would be?
What?
Sabrina? No.
No, there's really good, well-known people in our league. I'm not discrediting them. Like hell yeah to that. I'm all for that. But when people try to argue that she's not the face of our league, or if our league would be where we're at without her,
apologetic, immediately went viral. Within hours, clips were spreading across every platform. Fans were posting reaction videos. Analysts were debating whether Cunningham had crossed a line or finally said what needed to be said. The phrase itself became a rallying cry for Clark's supporters who have spent months watching people twist themselves into knots trying to minimize what she has done for the sport. But here is the thing about that moment. It was not even the most important thing.
Players in our league try to toughen up Caitlin. We call her CC. For even when I wasn't on her team, I know the talks that Phoenix had in the locker room of no, we're gonna prove her, we're gonna show her what the W really is. You know what I mean? And I get it to a certain extent. And every rookie coming into the league, that's how you're gonna treat them. But there's just more for her. So it's her second year, and now being on her team and seeing it, I'm what are people doing? Actually,
Cunningham said that day. Cunningham did not just rely on passion to make her case. She backed it up with cold, hard facts that are impossible to argue with. When Caitlin Clark went down with an injury last season and missed the WNBA All-Star Game, television viewership for the league dropped by more than 50%.
WNBA, Sophie Cunningham also talks about how teams target being rough with Caitlin Clark. We gotta toughen her up. We gotta rough her up a little bit. We gotta really show her what it's
like. Not a small dip, not a modest decline. Over half the audience simply disappeared the moment Clark was not on the floor. Ticket prices fell, streaming numbers cratered. The buzz evaporated almost instantly. Then when Clark returned, the numbers came right back. Arenas sold out. Ratings climbed. The conversation around women's basketball exploded again on social media and in mainstream sports coverage. Cunningham pointed to this directly and challenged anyone to look at those statistics and still argue that Clark is not essential to the league's current success. "The numbers are real," she said. "The impact is real, and anyone who cannot see that is blind." This is not a matter of opinion. It is a matter of documented.
Sophie said some very unapologetic things. The kind of things that have made her beloved by Fever fans and continue to have her adversaries and
record. And Cunningham was not willing to let people pretend otherwise. Here is where things got truly revealing and genuinely uncomfortable. Cunningham did not just defend Clark from the outside. She spoke as someone who has been on the inside. She described conversations she was aware of even before joining the Indiana Fever about how players across the league were approaching Clark's arrival. "Even when I wasn't on her team, I know the talks that were happening in Phoenix's locker room," Cunningham revealed. "It was like, no, we're going to show her what the W really is. We're going to toughen her up. We're going to rough her up a little bit." She acknowledged that there is a certain tradition of testing rookies in professional sports. Every athlete who enters a new league faces some version of that initiation. But Cunningham was clear that what Clark experienced went far beyond normal rookie hazing. It was excessive, it was targeted, and it was ongoing even into Clark's second season. "It's her second year, and now being on her team and seeing it from the inside, I'm like, what are people doing?" Cunningham said, her frustration evident. "It's just too much." Those words carry real weight coming from someone who played against Clark before becoming her teammate. Cunningham is not speculating. She is not reading headlines and forming opinions. She was in those buildings, aware of those conversations, and is now speaking about them publicly for the first time. Cunningham also tackled another issue that Clark fans have been raising for months, the question of officiating and the protection that the league's biggest star receives on the court. Her position was straightforward. The referees are not doing enough. She has seen the cheap shots. She has seen the hard fouls. She has watched players target Clark in ways that she believes cross the line between competitive physicality and something more deliberate. And she made it clear that she has had enough of watching it happen without sufficient consequence. This frustration, of course, is not entirely new for Cunningham. Fever fans will remember the moment she stepped in during a game against the Connecticut Sun, putting herself between Clark and players she felt were being overly aggressive. That was not a random emotional outburst. That was the action of someone who had been watching a pattern develop and finally decided to respond to it.
Out here, but it's funny now that I told the people upstairs, I was like, I will be her Sabrina Carpenter any day to her Taylor Swift. Like, I am so excited for this, and I just think honestly she's just a great human too. She has a lot of pressure and a lot of eyes on her shoulders, and she handles it so gracefully, and she's just a great human. So I'm just excited to be a part of something like that. And
her podcast made clear that the feelings driving that moment on the court have never gone away. If anything, they have intensified. What makes Cunningham's defense of Clark so unique is the vantage point from which she offers it. This is not a fan defending their favorite player. This is not an analyst sitting in a studio making arguments based on statistics and television ratings. This is a professional athlete who shares a locker room, a practice floor, and a bench with Caitlin Clark. She has seen how Clark handles the pressure. She has seen how Clark responds to adversity, and she has seen how the people around her treat her both inside and outside the organization. She has a lot of pressure and a lot of eyes on her, and she handles it so gracefully, Cunningham said, her tone shifting from anger to something closer to genuine admiration. She's just a great human. I'm so excited to be a part of something like this. That combination, fierce protectiveness and deep personal respect, is what gives Cunningham's words their power. She is not performing outrage for clicks. She genuinely cares about her teammate, genuinely believes in what Clark is doing for the sport, and is genuinely angry that so many people seem determined to undermine it. Perhaps the most thought-provoking part of Cunningham's podcast went beyond Clark specifically. She suggested that what is happening to Clark is not
not even just the league, but like women's basketball as a whole around the world. No, I think it's awesome. I think it's so funny because she's like 22, 23 years old, and the whole world is watching her.
Yeah.
Like, it is a cult following. I'm not kidding.
No, it's wild.
Like,
The airport today.
Insane.
It was like
entirely new, that the WNBA has a history of allowing its biggest stars to be treated a certain way, whether through targeting on the court, insufficient protection from officials, or narratives that the league itself sometimes benefits from allowing to play out. She referenced the way legends before Clark were handled during their peak years, suggesting that the league's relationship with its own stars has always been complicated. Whether you agree with that broader argument or not, it raises legitimate questions about how the WNBA manages the tension between competitive balance and the star-driven storylines that drive viewership and revenue. Cunningham is essentially arguing that the league sometimes lets its most important players absorb mistreatment because the drama is good for business, and that Clark is simply the latest and most prominent example of that pattern. It is a serious accusation, and it is one that league leadership is reportedly not happy about hearing said out loud on a widely distributed podcast. By all accounts, Cunningham's debut episode sent shockwaves through the league. Reports suggest that players across all 12 WNBA franchises are now quietly choosing sides in what has become one of the most significant internal debates women's basketball has seen in years. WNBA Commissioner Kathy Engelbert was reportedly caught off guard by the intensity of Cunningham's comments and is said to be working to assess the situation. The challenge for league leadership is that Cunningham did not just vent. She made specific, grounded arguments backed by real examples and real numbers. That is much harder to dismiss than a simple emotional rant. Meanwhile, for Clark's fan base, which has grown to include millions of people who had never watched a WNBA game before she arrived, Cunningham's podcast felt like vindication. Every frustration they had expressed, every concern they had raised about how Clark was being treated, had just been confirmed by one of her own teammates. Sophie Cunningham now has a weekly platform through the Volume Network, and it is clear she intends to use it. She is not going to soften her opinions to avoid controversy. She is not going to play nice with people she believes are being dishonest about what is happening in the league. She has positioned herself as someone willing to say the things that most players will only whisper, and that makes her an extraordinarily compelling voice in the current WNBA conversation. For Caitlin Clark, having a teammate this vocal and this passionate in her corner is significant. On the court, Cunningham provides physical protection and competitive intensity. Off the court, she is now providing something equally valuable, a credible insider voice willing to push back hard against the narratives that seek to diminish what Clark has built. For the WNBA, this moment is a crossroads. The league has benefited enormously from Clark's impact on viewership, ticket sales, and mainstream cultural attention. But Cunningham is forcing a harder conversation about whether the people running the league and playing in it are truly embracing that growth, or whether old habits, old resentments, and old power dynamics are creating friction that could ultimately harm the sport. Sophie Cunningham walked into her podcast debut and immediately delivered one of the most memorable episodes in WNBA media history. She was angry, she was honest, she was passionate, and she was completely, utterly unfiltered. Whether you agree with every word she said or not, one thing is undeniable: she meant every single bit of it. This was not a calculated media move. This was a person who has watched something she loves be complicated by politics, jealousy, and institutional inertia, and finally decided she was done staying quiet about it. The WNBA is changing. Caitlin Clark is at the center of that change. And Sophie Cunningham just made it very clear that she is going to be one of the loudest voices making sure that change actually sticks. That is all for today here at WNBA Updates. If you found this breakdown valuable, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss what comes next, because something tells us Sophie Cunningham is just getting started.